You know, I did What If the MCU was the DCCU, so now I'm trying to do another project like that. So what if the Arrowverse was Marvel?
I love the chase and the hunt, and I set the pace when I'm running. I always take what I want and I always give it 100. Don't need a bank, no I'm funded. Play the game like it's nothing. I'm always thankful for something. Don't take for granted, stay humble. Now wake up! It's time to look at the enemy. Look in the mirror if he is no...
Hello everyone and welcome back to the MrEliMac channel. I'm your host, MrEliMac, and today I'm going to be trying another long-form series similar to What If the MCU was the DCCU, except don't expect this weekly. Expect this a little bit more sporadic because it took me so long just to get this video made, or at least conceive what this video was going to be. So I'm going to be taking a lot more breaks in between these videos, mainly because of how much brain power I need to use just to get these ideas just like conceptual. So yeah, don't expect these types of videos, or at least this series, to be weekly. Expect them to be a little bit more thought out and a little bit spaced out. But we're getting into an interesting concept that I asked and you all were very well receiving of it. So what if the Arrowverse was Marvel? It's basically the MCU DCCU idea, but now reversed, because the Arrowverse was a very popular DC television universe with Arrow and Flash and Legends of Tomorrow, Supergirl, Constantine, if you consider Constantine, Black Lightning, Batwoman, and now we're at sort of the end of it. Even though Superman and Lois is not considered canon in the main Arrowverse, it's actually a separate Earth, I do like to include it because when it started, it was originally conceived as a show set in the Arrowverse. So I'm just gonna be making something for that. I'm not making something for Constantine, mainly because when it was created, it was on NBC and it ended on NBC, unlike Supergirl that started on CBS and ended on the CW. I'm only going to be focusing on the CW shows because that just helps my brain so much more than I need to put as much power into, if that makes sense. It just helps me a lot. But before I actually get into the idea, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. That way you can be up to date with all the videos I have here on the channel. Also hit the notification bell. That way you can be notified whenever a new video like this comes your way. So looking at the Arrowverse as a whole, looking specifically at the show Arrow, I wanted to try to find a character in the Marvel Universe that wasn't super obvious. I mean, the super obvious answer for, oh, we're doing the Marvel equivalent of Arrow, oh, that's simple. Hawkeye. That's the Arrow equivalent because he's the bow and arrow guy. Same with Green Arrow, he's the bow and arrow guy. I did not pick Hawkeye. I did not want to use Hawkeye because that felt like a too obvious of an answer. So I very much looked at all the major characters, and I also thought, okay, let's say this is set in the same universe as the DCCU that I created. Let's look at it. Who at this time is sort of like the Green Arrow level, where people know who he is. He's a popular character amongst the comic book fans, but when it comes to like overall Marvel overall fans, he's not one of the big named characters. And the name I'm about to throw out there may be a little controversial. I know a lot of people would think this character is actually popular amongst the wider audience, but he really didn't become as popular as he is now until the movies came out. So this is me sort of trying to put that, hopefully give you that perspective. And the character I'm using to replace Arrow is for the character of Captain America. Captain America will be the leading character of my Arrow equivalent, mainly because I think Captain America, around the time of 2011 or 12 when the show, I think it was 12 when the show came out. So around this time, he was not as popular as some people like to believe. Sure, they made a big ordeal on the news that, oh, Captain America has died. But that was it. After that, Captain America went back to the Marvel fandom obscurity, except for the big hardcore Marvel Comics fans. And so I decided to have him be sort of like the pillar of this new Marvelverse, or as I'm liking to call it, the Capverse. that is what I'm calling this universe. And I just think it just helps using him because he also leads easily to having grounded stories like Arrow really tried to do, at least in the early portions, having grounded stories. And also his flashbacks can be very easily adapted. Well, not super easily, but just instead of it being like someone stuck in captivity or stuck on an island, you can just have him do flashbacks of, hey, this is a man that has flashbacks to World War II. So you can do two different eras. You can do the World War II area stories in the flashbacks, and then you can do the modern era stories, which is now. And that's sort of how I'm going to be doing it. The show is not set mainly in World War II. The show is mainly set in modern times, and the flashbacks of World War II. I just felt like that would have been a lot easier. Also, I want to give a big shout out to some people in, or I can't name them all out right now, but a lot of the ideas that I'm coming up with, I had a lot of help with in a Discord group that I'm a part of. It was, hold on, I can find the Discord group. I can easily find the Discord group. Let me try to find it. It was the Radicals. That's the Discord group, Radicals, for fans of Mr. Radtastic on TikTok and YouTube. I very much threw out this idea, and they gave me a lot of suggestions, got me to think about it a little bit more, and they really helped me with creating, or at least coming up with a lot of these ideas of who would be the best spot, and I think they helped me a lot with that. So, going into this video is only going to cover the first 2 seasons of the Captain America show for the simple fact of I just want to, because the way the Arrowverse is set up is each season is sort of important to the grander scheme of things. So because of that, because in the universe, in what really happened, Flash debuts when Arrow season 3 starts. I'm like, okay, I really can't talk about each show individually. I really have to focus on, I can't do one episode on the Arrow show and one episode on the Flash show. I could, but the crossovers are very important, so I really need to just do bulks of, okay, this episode is about the first 2 seasons of the Arrow show. The next episode is going to be, or the next part is going to be about Arrow season 3 and Flash season 4. That's how I'm going to be structuring these videos. So they're going to be quite a bit. So I hope you're prepared. But anyway, going into this actual pitching of the new Arrowverse, which is the Capverse. So season 1, I'll just tell you, the show will not be called Captain America. I am not making it Captain America because I'm trying to continue with the formula that Arrow had, because Arrow was not called Green Arrow. It was just called Arrow. So for me, this show is called The Captain. And I very much want to, in modern times, because I would look at it this is a major plot point, is that Captain America doesn't call himself Captain America in the modern times. He thinks it's cheesy, he doesn't think that's right, and I'm gonna have some people agree with him, but then I'm gonna have other people disagree, no, you should call yourself Captain America. And sort of continuing on with how Arrow did it, he doesn't fully resume the Captain America title until season 4. That's a little Easter egg, a little spoiler for what's gonna happen ahead of time. But very much he's just calling himself the Captain. He is the Captain, or he just calls himself Captain Steve Rogers. I'm not doing the thing of he has a secret identity. Everyone knows that Steve Rogers is Captain America. I just like that idea that they presented in the MCU, and I'm going to continue that here in this little universe. But I'm going to tell you about the main cast and sort of who their parallel is going to be. So it's obvious Steve Rogers is the parallel for Oliver Queen. Sharon Carter is Laurel Lance's parallel in this universe. Brian Fallsworth, who I'm conceptualizing as sort of the grandson or the great-grandson of the original Union Jack. His analog is Tommy Merlin. I'll get into why he is that analog in a minute. Sam Wilson is Diggle. Ricky Barnes is sort of a parallel universe version of Bucky Barnes, but she is a female. But instead, I'm just changing that. This is a niece of Bucky Barnes from World War II, so I'm just changing the character of Ricky Barnes' origin story a little bit to fit this. Betsy Ross, who is not Betty Ross, but Betsy Ross, who is a Golden Age character. I'm bringing her over to this modern era, and she's the Moira Queen analog. And finally, the Quentin Lance analog is General Nick Fury. And that's my main cast of Steve Rogers, Sharon Carter, Brian Fallsworth, Sam Wilson, Ricky Barnes, Betsy Ross, and Nick Fury. That's our main cast. And so sort of, I'll give you an idea of sort of what happens at the beginning. The pilot episode very much deals with Captain America getting thawed out from being on ice for years, for over 70 years at this point. And so the story with that is him the entire first season, him trying to reintegrate into society because of the big gap, but also it's sort of him working with S.H.I.E.L.D. and him deciding to work as a hero for S.H.I.E.L.D. And the main show, originally I was going to want to set it all in Washington, D.C., but instead I'm deciding to just keep it in New York because I think that would help with a little part of the story that I have, but also I just like the idea of the Triskelion set in New York, sort of like the Ultimate Universe. But we have Captain America going on, meeting with all these people, the supporting cast, and sort of being a hero in New York in the show. And again, not calling himself Captain America the entire time. But then the main flashbacks, or the flashbacks for season 1, deal with his first year as Captain America, where you see Steve Rogers go from scrawny Steve to big Steve, like Captain America Steve. His best friend is Bucky Barnes, who's one of the soldiers that he's working with. Michael Duffy is the drill sergeant, who is now sort of his superior officer. Colonel Chester Phillips is there as well. Abraham Erskine is there. But sort of the main antagonists of the flashbacks are Arnim Zola and Johann Schmidt, Red Skull. And they're the ones that are trying to stop Steve. I'm not making them Hydra. They are full-on Nazis. We will see the iconography of the Nazi party, but very much they're sort of the bad guys of this story. I think it's a little obvious, but they're the bad guys of the flashback sequences, and it's all about Steve and Bucky trying to take down Red Skull and Arnim Zola. And that's the flashback portion. It's very simple. We would see the death of Abraham Erskine, of course. Michael Duffy would also die because Michael Duffy is sort of my Yao Fei analog. Peggy Carter is very much my Shadow analog with the flashbacks. And Bucky Barnes, I think it's obvious, he's my Slade analog, which if that doesn't tell you a little bit what's happening in season 2, then you haven't seen Arrow. That's all I can say. But now we're going to go over to some of the recurring cast members, these are the sort of major recurring cast members that I think you need to know about. One of them is Bernie Rosenthal, who in the comics was a love interest of Steve in sort of like the 80s and 90s, I want to say. And so she's sort of my Felicity Smoke analog. I wanted to, that story, if you know what's going to happen with Bernie then. But Bernie is very much a character who was a love interest in the comics, and she hasn't really been used a lot recently, and so I decided to bring her into the show because I think Captain America's supporting cast needs to be filled out, and since she's someone in the supporting character mark, there we go, we have her there. Some other antagonists who are recurring, Diamondback Rachel Leighton, I can't remember, I don't know how you pronounce her name, it's in comics, but Diamondback, who was another love interest of Captain America, who's also sort of a villain, she's in this because she's sort of my Huntress analog, my Helena Bertinelli analog. Batroc the Leaper is here, and he's my Deadshot analog. I know everyone's probably like, really? Batroc is your Deadshot? Yes, he is. I want Batroc in the show. And then Mother Night, Susan Scarborough, is my China White analog, and I wanted her to be like a recurring threat that pops in throughout the entire show. This is going to be the one that I think a lot of people might get a little confused about. Roy Harper has an analog for this show, and he's Jack Monroe. Who is Jack Monroe, you ask? Simple. Jack Monroe is the Bucky Barnes of the 1950s, who later goes on and calls himself Nomad. I very much wanted to have Jack Monroe play a part in this show, especially with the idea of, with Roy Harper in the comics being sort of like the sidekick to Green Arrow, I sort of wanted to start introducing that element here, with Jack Monroe being sort of in the comics, being a Bucky Barnes, being a sidekick, maybe not to Steve Rogers, but to a Captain America. And so I wanted to start introducing that element into this with Jack Monroe. And I think it's sort of obvious where some of these characters are being put to, but I just wanted to just lay out the groundwork. After I fully introduce all the characters, I'll start going more into the plot and the main villain plot and sort of the main story of season 1. But the other major antagonist, who is sort of my Malcolm Merlyn character, is Senator Del Rusk. And if you've all seen Avengers Earth's Mightiest Heroes, you know who Del Rusk is. Del Rusk is Johann Schmidt, aka Red Skull. Red Skull is also in the modern era. He is back in the modern era as the main antagonist. Probably the way I'm going to say it is that he was also in sort of when he presumably died, he didn't die. Similar to how Steve presumably died. It's just when Red Skull was found, he was found by people that were on his side, and he was just reoriented into the world a little bit easier, but then he got himself a fake name and all that, and he became a senator of New York. And now we get into the main plot, hence why I specified New York as a big portion. So Senator Del Rusk is the senator of New York, and he's someone that is anti-Captain America. He is anti all of that, but also he insists on speaking to Steve and being like, hey, why don't you just call yourself Captain America again? To sort of give a little scene of Malcolm saying to Oliver, I think I like the name Green Arrow. And Oliver's like, no, that's a dumb name. Sort of how, like, but Steve wouldn't call him, say the Captain America name is dumb. He would say, no, I just think that's a name from a bygone era, and I don't want to use that name anymore. And so we get into the thing of Del Rusk sort of trying to look down on Cap and trying to stop his heroism, not directly, but sort of trying to stop some of the bigger heroism actions that he's doing, when we ultimately reveal that the plan that Red Skull Del Rusk has been in his head, and like his plan is to purify Brooklyn. And purify, I'm using that word specifically because remember, Red Skull is a Nazi, and so his plan is to purify the borough of Brooklyn. Why Brooklyn? Because that is Captain America, where Cap is from. And so he's trying to directly go to and attack Captain America's home and where he's from. And because Red Skull is still holds a personal grudge against Captain America for all those times. And the reason why Brian Falsworth was the grandson of the original Union Jack, why he is in this role as someone that is the Tommy Merlin analog, is because Brian Falsworth works with Senator Del Rusk. He doesn't know he's the Red Skull, but he works with him as sort of like as a political liaison of sorts. Brian is sort of pro-Captain America, whereas Del Rusk is anti-Captain America, and so they butt heads a lot about that. But once Brian Falsworth discovers that Senator Del Rusk is Red Skull, he tries to help save people, stop Red Skull, but ultimately that goes to the wayside as Brian Falsworth dies. Captain America is able to stop Red Skull, potentially killing Red Skull. I'm still a little on the fence, mainly because of where Malcolm Merlyn goes in the Arrow show, where his character arc goes. And so I just wanted to have Red Skull have this big thing and this big villain thing. Ultimately, some of Brooklyn gets destroyed. Not all of it, but some of it gets destroyed. And that leads to the big thing of Captain America thinking of himself as not a hero. And he was able to save a lot of people, but not everyone, and he will always carry that on his shoulders, and he wasn't even able to save his friend, Brian Falsworth. And for lack of a better term, that is season 1 of this show. There's really not much else to say, because Arrow is such a... Again, I don't want to go specifically in this episode, Captain America fights this character, and this is the plotline. No, the overall plotline is... Red Skull is trying to purify Brooklyn, and he has these machinations inside of the government, inside of S.H.I.E.L.D., and Captain America is able to take all of it out. And ultimately, some of Brooklyn gets destroyed, but he's able to save a vast majority of all of New York. But he's still weighing down on his friend dying and Brooklyn, some of Brooklyn getting destroyed. So with that being said about Season 1, let's move on to Season 2. And we have a returning cast. Brian Falsworth is no longer a main character. Bernie Rosenthal and Jack Monroe have been promoted to the main cast, and Bucky Barnes has been promoted to the main cast. And sort of the flashbacks here deal with the second year where he's going up against characters like Dr. Faustus and Baron Heinrich Zemo making his debut, mainly in the flashbacks. And some of the recurring characters that we get in this season: Mother Knight returns, Diamondback returns, Batroc the Leaper returns, but we also get new characters like Taskmaster will be a recurring character here. Beetle, Abner Jenkins, will be a recurring character. A love interest for Sam Wilson, Lila Taylor, will be a recurring character. She is an actual character from the comics. I did not make her up. I'm glad I didn't, because I wouldn't know what to do. But also Natasha Romanoff, Black Widow, will be a recurring character. She would sort of be the Sarah Lance character of this season, where she's someone that knows what she's doing, and sort of Sarah Lance was the original Black Canary, but just calling herself the Canary. I'm thinking of doing that the same with Natasha Romanoff. She just calls herself the Widow. I don't know. That's still something I'm thinking about. That would be a pitch that I would speak to the studios, like, oh, this is what I'm thinking, and the studios can say, no, we don't want to do that. So Natasha Romanoff is there, and her supporting character of Sin, who was in season 2, that would be Yelena Belova in this season. And sort of now I'm going to sort of introduce sort of my, or not antagonist, but Valentina Allegra de Fontaine would also be in the show, sort of like the Amanda Waller character, because the Suicide Squad get introduced in Arrow season 2, and so Thunderbolts get introduced in the Captain season 2. And it's only a team, I'll specify this episode then. It's a team of Sam Wilson, who has fully become the Falcon, Lila Taylor, and Batroc, Taskmaster, and Beetle teaming up together to do some mission for Valentina Allegra de Fontaine. And just like in the Suicide Squad episode, they do the mission, some die, actually only one dies in that episode, and then we move on. That's that episode. I just wanted to talk about the Thunderbolts and that little side story for Sam Wilson. But sort of the main antagonists of this show are Alexa Lukin and Alexander Lukin, who are major antagonists in Captain America comics, but mainly Alexander is sort of the major antagonist. Alexa sort of taking the spot of Isabel Rochev, and Alexander taking the spot of Brother Blood. And now this is where I do the big reveal of, if you're a fan of Arrow and a fan of Arrow Season 2, Slade Wilson becomes Deathstroke in that show and serves as the main antagonist of that season of Season 2. Well, Bucky Barnes is coming back, and the Winter Soldier is the main antagonist of the Captain Season 2. And he's not as calculated as Slade Wilson is. He's not the one like, I'm wearing a suit and I am being bad guy, I am in control of all the machinations. No, Winter Soldier is still mind controlled. Alexander was the original. The way I look at Season 2 of Arrow and the main villain plotline is Alexander Lukin is actually the one controlling Winter Soldier. However, he dies because Alexa tells Winter Soldier to kill him, and so Alexa is actually revealed to be the main antagonist. But we would get an awesome Winter Soldier Captain America fight where Captain America discovers about, so I would say around the episode 15 mark, where we're in the second half of the show, that's when Cap discovers that Bucky is the Winter Soldier, and he's trying to save Bucky. And then we show the flashbacks on how that's even possible, with Dr. Faustus and Baron Zemo sort of capturing Bucky and mind warping his mind and sort of beginning to sow the seeds of dissension. And I would even have a scene sort of like in Arrow where it's the flashback and the main fight of them sort of showing Bucky and Captain America fighting each other, because I would even show the instance of Baron Zemo using the mind control on Bucky, hence why Captain America is sort of realizing like, oh, I was able to save him then, I can save him now, even though when he saved him then, Bucky died. That would Season 2 would also be where I would do the, oh, Bucky died in World War II season. And that's sort of a big plot point of the Lukins, the father and daughter team of the Lukins, are trying to take over New York, and by take over, I mean they're a corporation, so they're trying to take over New York, and they're also trying to take down S.H.I.E.L.D. from within, because they deal with grander means that we don't understand, and they're using the Winter Soldier as their weapon. But the Captain America is able to save the day. Alexander Lukin dies. Alexa Lukin also dies after she gets in a fight with Black Widow. But also, there's something, sort of the big thing that creates sort of this universe that I've been talking about, is the fact that in Arrow, in 2 episodes at the mid-season finale of Arrow Season 2, they introduced Barry Allen. And so now I'm introducing my Barry Allen, which the first episode would be dealing with Captain America trying to save this person, but then he discovers that this person was able to save himself, and they're sort of getting out of there together, and they're both in New York. In the second episode, that would be the mid-season finale, just dealing with trying to discover more about the Winter Soldier. And who is this person that I am talking about? Simple, my Barry Allen analog is Tony Stark. Tony Stark, Iron Man would be the next show. He would be the Flash show. So that is something to think about before I release or even film the next part of this little series I'm doing. But as of right now, yeah, that's really all I have for Arrow Season 1, or Arrow Season 1, the Captain Season 1, and the Captain Season 2. Yeah, those are my analogs for right now. What were your thoughts on it? I very much I really wanted to do the hardest, try to keep the plotline similar to the original shows, but also try to add my own flavor to it, and very much try to add what I think would be best for the shows. Oh, and in Season 2, Betsy Ross would die because, again, the Moira Queen analog, she would die in the season as well. And so, yeah, that's sort of what direction I'm going with now. So the next part will be the Captain Season 3 and Iron Man Season 1. Yes, I am calling that show Iron Man, because that's what The Flash did. The Flash kept the name of the hero. He didn't try to change it to the Scarlet Speedster or anything. But yeah, what were your thoughts on the ideas? Post them in the comments down below. Did you like it? Did you hate it? Were you indifferent to it? I'm a little frazzled with this, because it's really hard to fully talk about plot points and do a YouTube video at the same time. Whatever your thoughts, post them in the comments down below. Also, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. That way you can be up to date with all the videos I have here on the channel. Also, hit the notification bell. That way you can be notified whenever a new video like this comes your way. But until next time, I've been Mr. EliMac. You've been the audience, and I hope you all have a great rest of the day.